Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by the Unger Real Estate Group, powered by eXp Realty, proudly serving Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties. Call 407-790-9957 or visit WeSellOrlando.net. Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you for our final regular season show of the 2017-2018 season, and it is time to reveal the 2018 Bannies Award winners. Eric Lopez is joining us from his usual home office, but Brian Murphy is somewhere in Winter Haven. What in the hell is going on?
I'm joining you from the real-life set of Last House on the Left. That's where I'm joining you from. I am joining you from the places God has never seen.
Okay, so
somewhere in the middle with no light has bathed the streets that I am on for years.
Okay, so
I drive my way back from Tampa.
Okay, so my mother taught me that this is what you do when someone's lost. You just keep them on the phone until they get to where they're going. So we picked the right night to record this. We're sorry.
I'll tell you what. After like 15 miles, I have now found an open industrial parking lot, so nothing bad can happen now.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. Lopez is here. We've got lots for you. Blackandgoldbanneret.com.
For those that don't know, by the way, if you're wondering, Murph did go to the Yankees-Rays game, which went 4+ hours because, apparently this year, if Murph goes to a baseball game, college or pro, it's going to go over 4 hours.
Yeah.
And watch the Yankees get swept by a Double-A baseball team.
Oh, my God. Don't get me started. Don't get me started. So,
in fairness, Sam Unger got to watch that in person on Saturday and watch the great Sonny Gray, who may be designated for assignment in 3 months.
Jeff, are you panicking on the Yankees? Are you pushing the panic button on the Yankees?
I'm not ready. No, I'm not gonna hit the panic button right now. Not right yet. Not just yet. Not just yet.
Panic. I'll tell you because Murph's a Yankee. For those that don't know, Murph's a Yankee fan. Jeff's a Yankee fan.
Sam is a Yankee fan. So Eric, you're outnumbered. But go ahead.
I feel like you guys are destined to be that team that makes the playoffs and gets swept in the playoffs and have that graphic where Stanton, Judge, and Sanchez combined going like 2 for 30 in the playoffs.
This just feels so much like all those years when the Yankees would win the East Division and then get clobbered by the California Angels. Or I say the California Angels, the Anaheim Angels or whatever. They would just run into that buzzsaw every single time. It would just drive me absolutely crazy. This has all
the Angels had their number. The Angels had their number for years, though. The Angels always had their number.
Yeah, that's true. Well, anyway, we've now wasted our monologue for the award show on the Yankees. But all right, Black and Gold Banneret's where you want to go. We're going to have the results up for you this week. Releasing this on a Monday. We didn't have a podcast last week because our schedules didn't work out. We had a couple of other things that we were doing. It's the summertime. We kind of throttle things back a little bit, but. We wanted to get this up for you because our awards are in. We wanted to thank all the fans who voted for the awards as well, and to those of you who didn't vote for the awards, well, you lose. UCF_Banneret is our Twitter account. Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret is our Facebook, and you can also hit us up individually at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, and Spokes_Murphy on Twitter, and subscribe to this podcast if you don't already on Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and tune in wherever fine podcasts are given away for free. Guys, let's dive right in. and we start with our first award that we had, which was Coach of the Year. Our nominees were Scott Frost of football, Brian Kaneko of women's tennis, Becky Kramer of rowing, and Tiffany Roberts-Sahadak from women's soccer. And your winner with 74% of the vote, Scott Frost. This was the one that I was really interested in because of I wondered how the fans would react. And I reached out to Sam, or actually Sam reached out to me, and he said, bottom line, guy led us to an undefeated season. Can't take that away. And I think that that's pretty much right on the money. I thought that this might be a backlash vote, but it wasn't. You guys, were you surprised by it? I thought that there would be a pretty strong backlash vote.
I'm glad that the percentage is as high as it is. I didn't expect it to be that high, considering you've got 4 choices and they're all good choices. But that's the right decision. It's the right call, and I'm glad UCF fans aren't harboring that much animosity towards Scott Frost. There are some still ridiculous for ridiculous reasons, but not that much.
Eric?
I think it's overblown. I think you have that 10% audience that has a grudge, but I honestly think that 90% of the fan base is fine with Scott Frost. I think we overblow like
the vocal minority.
Reaction. Right, correct.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is here. I guarantee you that the majority is fine. If Scott Frost were to walk into the stadium, in Spectrum Stadium, he would get standing ovation. Clearly.
I think he should.
He would.
Yeah.
He would. I mean, you might have a couple.
I don't know if he would, but I think he should.
He would. I mean, George O'Leary got cheered after an 0 season the following year. So I think Scott would. I think Scott did a tremendous job. I am happy, though, that other coaches got acknowledged, though. Obviously, 74% tells me other coaches got votes, which I think is a good thing.
Becky Kramer finished second at 17%.
That's good.
Tiffany
right?
at 5% and Brian Kaneko at 4%.
I think Brian should have gotten a little bit higher, but I'm happy that Becky got 17%. And if it was probably a normal year, she probably would have won it, but it was not a normal year.
Yeah. Comeback athlete of the year. This was actually the closest one out of all the awards in terms of the votes. The nominees were Cree Finfrock of baseball, Kayla Adamek of women's soccer, and Zakiya Saunders of women's basketball. And Cree Finfrock wins the award with 44% of the vote. I thought that Kayla Adamek would win this, but she and Zakiya Saunders finished with 28%. Brian, you followed Cree throughout the year, and I know you thought that this was well-deserved.
No, I mean, Cree coming back from a major shoulder injury. I mean, he did not actually have Tommy John. I thought he did initially, but it was a labrum tear. And if anybody knows how arms work in baseball, a major shoulder repair is a lot more tenuous than an elbow repair. A major shoulder injury can really derail your career entirely. So Cree came back after a year off and showed a really good fastball, a really biting slider. Should have been drafted higher in the MLB draft, in my opinion. But no, I mean, he really had a good season, both as a reliever out of the pen, as like an Andrew Miller type guy out of the pen at first, and then moving into be their Friday starter, which at some points of the season he was their best starting pitcher. So no, it was a great comeback season for Cree, and I'm interested to see what he'll do in the pros.
Yeah. Breakout athlete of the year. This was a runaway. The nominees were Zakiya Saunders of women's basketball, Kaylee Jones of women's golf, Denali Shopaker of softball, and Mackenzie Milton from football. And Mackenzie won 90% of the vote for Breakout Athlete of the Year. I thought that the definition of breakout kind of applied most loosely to him out of these 4, but when you go from being, like you said, Eric Lopez, and we'll go with you on this, being booed at the bowl game last year to being a Heisman vote getter and incoming Heisman candidate for the following year, that qualifies as a breakout, doesn't it?
Yeah, he broke through and had the year he did, getting Heisman votes. Yeah, that's not a surprise. If anything, that's interesting. He got 90%. Who got the other votes?
5% to Zakiya Saunders and 5% to Denali Shopaker.
Wow. How about that? That's good. They got acknowledged. That's good acknowledgement. But yeah, no, Milton was the obvious choice here. We knew he was going to win. It was just going to be the question of the margin. But yeah, I mean, it's funny how people want to, people like to rewrite history, and everybody's like all of a sudden, oh, McKenzie's our guy and all this. But you're right. I remember we were both there, Jeff. We were at that bowl game, the Cure Bowl, where UCF lost to Arkansas State, and they booed McKenzie Milton off the field, and that was a very sad moment. I remember that.
Yeah, I never thought that was fair.
I thought it was disgraceful. I remember I was sitting with you and Trace, and it reminded me of when Kyle Israel got booed, and he got treated badly when he was a quarterback, and that was unfortunate. So I was happy for the kid that it's turned around for him. From that night on, to think about that, he would go from that night on where people wondered if he was going to be a quality starting quarterback to now where he is. Now people are trying to argue for him as, where does he rank as far as the quarterbacks in the country? It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Senior Leader of the Year. This is the first year that we've done this. And yes, boys, there was some controversy when we released the poll. The nominees were Shaquan Burkett of football, Kia Bright of volleyball, A.J. Davis of men's basketball, and Zakiya Saunders of women's basketball. The controversy stemmed from some users on Twitter saying, hey, like Shaquem Griffin, where is he in this award? And I mentioned straight away that, two things. Number one, that, we wanted to kind of spread it out a little bit evenly. So that's why he wasn't in there. He was nominated for two other awards. And one Twitter user, I forget exactly who, brought up a good point. He said, that's a good point. Come to think of it, if he was nominated for Men's Tennis Player of the Year, he probably would have won that too, which was a good point. But Senior Leader of the Year, A.J. Davis with 50% of the vote. Burkett had 29, Saunders had 21, but A.J. Davis gets the Senior Leader of the Year award. So I thought that was an interesting result.
How much of that is because of men's basketball being popular compared to the other sports? Now
you could say that you could say that about pretty much any of these, right?
Well, it's just disappointing to me. I think Burkett, probably the people that probably didn't vote for Burkett is like, well, no, I think Griffin was the more valuable guy, right? Like, I feel he lost some votes to people that felt that Griffin was the guy at football, and maybe they voted for Davis because that's the name they recognize. I think it should have been Zakiya Saunders, personally.
Yeah, she got my vote too.
Without her, I don't even know where this women's basketball season would have gone. I don't think they're put it this way. I don't think they would have been at a WNIT team without her. She was the clear leader on the team, clear best player on the team. She was the leader on and off the court. I remember even when she was redshirting last year, how she was leading the team at practices that I was at. She should have gotten the vote, but I think obviously they went with Davis because of the men's basketball popularity and all the good articles that Murph wrote about A.J. Davis this year.
So it's your fault, Murph.
Yay! It's all my fault. It's all my fault.
Or credit. I don't say it's fault. Maybe credit.
I'll let you defend AJ. Go ahead, Murph.
No, I think Eric's right though. It's like it's sort of the same reason, kind of like why Cree got a big share of the vote too, is because I know baseball is still below men's basketball, but it does get more press than many other sports. So that's why basketball and baseball floats to the top, and then football's at the very, very top in its own stratosphere. But yeah, I mean, I will say this about AJ though. Like when BJ Taylor's hurt, Taco Fall is hurt, Aubrey Dawkins, who you expect to be your best player, even if he doesn't have much experience with the team, he's out. I mean, someone needed to pick up the slack, and AJ was there to basically give you a double-double every night. Was a really versatile player who played almost every position except for point, basically. Really good defensively, improved as a perimeter shooter, and just a quiet leader, and really a guy that you look back on, and I think his impact on this this program over the 3 years will sort of be forgotten, but and then in other words, it'll be underrated. I think he did a lot for this program, but because he wasn't a real flashy guy, and because he wasn't spectacular in any one skill set, I think it'll kind of be washed over. But he really, really did a lot.
You reminded me a lot of a guy named Marius Boyd, who played for UCF in the A Sundays, who is just one of those kind of just a grinder type guy who didn't and even Marius, he didn't put a lot of points on the scoreboard. Certainly not as much as AJ did at times, but but without his presence on the floor, they would have lost a lot more games than they did. So congrats to A.J. Davis, and a job well done. All right, this is our last one before we hit a break here. You talk about popularity for football. Well, here you go. Newcomer of the year. The nominees were Mike Hughes for football, Christina Fisher of volleyball, Denali Schappacher of softball, and Rebecca Stolmar of women's tennis. And Mike Hughes, you want to talk about a runaway, 92% of the vote went to Mike Hughes as the newcomer of the year. The junior college transfer basically spent all of 4 months on UCF's campus before he was able to turn his transfer into one of the greatest moments in UCF sports history and a first-round draft selection. Brian, you saw how good this guy was in person numerous times, as did you, Eric. I don't know how you argue with this one, right?
Yeah, and we already. Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, this was a no-brainer, and not a surprise, right? I mean, he made a big impact, special teams and defensive back, right, Murph? I mean, obviously, interesting question. If he doesn't arrive on campus, Murph, does this team still go undefeated?
Gosh, that is a good question.
That's a good question. I mean, they definitely don't have you can't assume they have a really important kickoff touchdown on Black Friday. So right. that changed the game. So you can take that game in a nutshell and say, like, well, they don't win that game except without Mike Hughes. Overall, he was very good in the secondary. He turned into their best corner. Would they have still won all of those games without him on defense? I think so. Because just their offense was so good. They weren't really involved in a ton of close games. But that USF game and what he did on special teams is the signature of the season, really.
I don't know. I point to that conference championship game against Memphis, and when he was on Anthony Miller, that was just a battle. If you put a lesser guy on Anthony Miller, it probably would have resulted in possibly a Memphis victory, even though Miller got his a couple times. I mean, Miller's a good enough player. I mean, he was drafted by the Chicago Bears himself, but that was a battle, and I thought that Mike Hughes basically played Miller to a draw in that game.
I think in the first half, you're right. Like in the first half, you're right, but like in the second half, like Anthony Miller just sort of found ways to really exploit UCF's defense. Now, and we talked about this game last week. Like that game defensively was not a fun. Was not good.
Well, you know what kind of games I like. But anyway, so that's our newcomer of the year to Mike Hughes. Let's take a quick break. And when we get back, we'll have sort of the All Sports Awards, which are Game of the Year, Play of the Year, Moment of the Year, Performance of the Year, and then the Male and Female Athlete of the Year. And we'll wrap this up. Here we go. We'll be right back. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Back after this. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by the Unger Real Estate Group, powered by eXp Realty. Sam Unger and his team proudly serve Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties, specializing in buying, selling, and new construction. Sam is a proud UCF graduate, class of 2006, and he's such a dedicated Knight fan that right now, if you work with him as your realtor, he will donate a portion of his commission to the UCF Football Excellence Fund in your name. So if you're ready to buy a new home or sell your current home, upgrade or downsize, Sam and his team have you covered so you can find the right home at the right price in the right location. So give him a call right now at 407-790-9957. Again, that's 407-790-9957. Or visit on the web at WeSellOrlando.net. Again, that's WeSellOrlando.net. You can also reach them on Facebook at facebook.com/WeSellOrlando. Get in touch with the Unger Real Estate Group today and make finding your dream home a reality.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
You know, Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
And welcome back to the 2018 Bannies Awards show here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy, who is still stuck in some industrial parking lot somewhere between here and Tampa, which, as always, is exactly where you want to be. By the way, you can still follow us throughout the off season. We'll be writing. We'll be putting up some new content. We'll even have some podcasts coming out every now and then. What we call our summer sessions, where we interview some UCF alumni to catch up on what they're doing. You can follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter, blackandgoldbanneret.com as well, and Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. All right. Game of the year. This ended up being a runaway that more of a runaway than I thought it would be. The nominees for Game of the Year: women's soccer beating North Carolina in double overtime in August. Softball getting a victory over number 4 Florida 1-0, giving up just one hit in that game. And then 2 football games. The Memphis game in the American Athletic Conference Championship, 62-55 in overtime. And football over USF 49-42. The USF game, the War on I-4, classic UCF game, maybe the classic game of the year in college football, won this with 87% of the vote. 5% each to the Memphis game and the softball game, 3% to women's soccer. I was surprised that it was this much of a blowout. What about you, Eric Lopez?
That's a great number. I'm amazed. I'm impressed with the softball fans going with the 5% there for that Florida.
I thought
good.
You guys were right. I got to give you both of you guys credit. I thought the Memphis game would have gotten a few more votes than it did, and it only got 5% itself.
I think I think the more people have taken aback. I think the USF game was just a more enjoyable, wild game, whereas I think the Memphis game, and Murph, we broke it down a last episode. There was a lot of screw ups in that game.
That's
UCF
what I thought made that game much more wild. But anyway, go ahead with what you're saying.
No, people don't like to see mess up and mistakes. Whereas the USF game, that was a back and forth. The atmosphere I thought was better than the Memphis game. Maybe I don't know if it's because of the kickoff times or whatever. Quite frankly, I think UCF fans, it's a rival game. USF's a bigger deal than beating Memphis. With all due respect to Memphis, even though the Memphis game was the title game, beating USF and ending their quest. You had the performance with Flowers. And you saw plays at that game that we may never, ever see again. We may never see a kick return like that. We may never see 3 touchdowns scored in 53 seconds like we did in that fourth quarter at the end there.
Yeah.
That was some iconic stuff, whereas, the Memphis game, you know what I compare it to? It's like the U.S. hockey team in 80. Everybody remembers the Russia win, the Soviet Union win. Mm-hmm. Nobody remembers the gold medal game win.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how
the gold medal game. Yeah, everyone forgets that the gold medal game was against Finland.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they had to beat Finland in order to win the gold medal. Murph, your thoughts?
I think that's the right decision. I think even the separation is correct. Like, I don't know what other we put up 4 nominees and they're fine nominees. But I mean, when Sports Illustrated basically says that game is the game of the year in sports, all sports for 2017, it's a pretty easy call. And I'm glad that at the very least the softball tied the Memphis game, because the Memphis game wasn't that good and it doesn't deserve to get a lot of votes. So,
you guys are just props. You guys are. I mean, it was a good game too, just not as good as the USF game. Let's not go say it sucked.
Sloppy. It was a sloppy
you
game.
Guys are.
There was some sloppiness.
Man, you guys are such. You guys are such trolls. You guys are like, if it's not this one, it's because this one sucks. It's not that it wasn't as good. It's because this one stinks.
I think also it tells people don't like the overtime rule. I think the overtime rule takes away from that game because it's like it's gimmicky. I don't think people.
We've had college overtime for 20 years now. we've had college
I know, but I'm
overtime
just
for
telling
20 years. Everyone's
I
used
think-
to it now.
I know, but that doesn't. I think it takes. I mean, I don't think people look at it. Man, that was an incredible triple overtime game. I mean, no, they don't look at it that way. I think they look at it. Oh, that was a gimmicky end. It's like a great soccer match that ends on a penalty kick. Nobody remembers. Nobody ever says, "Wow, that was the greatest soccer match I ever saw." Did you see that penalty kick? Wow, no, nobody thinks that. I think the USF game being authentic with the wild finish, what was at stake on both sides. And I do think, Adam Amin calling it. It was an exciting game that everybody watched, and more people watched the game. And it's a game that nobody that was in that building will ever forget anytime soon. And I also think this. I think some of the UCF fans, the Memphis game, one of the things that takes away from that was also the day that Scott Frost basically became the Nebraska coach officially, basically. So,
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he resigned like a couple of hours later. So,
And the
I
news
also
broke during the game.
correct. So,
Yeah.
I think to some people, maybe that takes away from it a little bit as well.
And Jeffrey, can I continue to just beat this dead horse real quickly? People also need to remember about the Memphis game. Like, yeah, UCF at times looked like they were going to lose to USF, but there was never a moment in late in the fourth quarter where I thought that's it, this game is over, USF's going to win. In the Memphis game, UCF should have lost. I will say that again. They should have lost when Mackenzie Milton throws a what is that pick over the middle, which really should have been turned into a game-winning field goal. That doesn't happen. There's the block. There's the penalty. Now it's missed again.
Well, that was the thing, too. The officiating in that game was really not good. There was confusion. I mean, it was just a lot of weird stuff there. That was just, you're right, man.
You know what? I like weird games, and I'm sticking to it. All right, moving on. The play
I just
of
like the fact that Murph liked the fact that the softball game should have gotten ahead of that game. That's great.
Yeah.
the play
I totally would have been in favor.
right. Play of the year. Obviously, we referred to it. Mike Hughes' kickoff return against USF was one of the nominees, along with Trey Neal's interception against Memphis, Christine Creighton's goal against North Carolina to give UCF the win, a golden goal against number 4 UNC, and Brody Wofford's robbing of a home run by Cincinnati for UCF baseball. That ended up on the SportsCenter Top 10. The winner with 77%. Mike Hughes, of course, with the kickoff return touchdown. Trey Neal got 20% out of that.
I'm surprised. I thought Mike Hughes would get more.
Well, I mean, that's the Hughes play is an iconic play, but I think that a lot of I think that I really was surprised that the Trey Neal getting him as much as 20% too.
I would argue I defended the Trey Neal play last week. I think that's an iconic play too. There's not a bigger interception in the history of this program than that interception. That interception won the American Conference Championship. That's what Trey Neal will probably be remembered for, more than likely, for the rest of his life. Anytime you see Trey Neal, it'll be, wow, he's the one that made the interception that won the American Conference Championship game. And I think that's what some people kind of why they voted for that one, because it won him the championship. That being, whereas in the Hughes play, you could argue that USF was stupid for kicking off to him. Like, why are you kicking off to him? That was perplexing to me. But obviously, the Hughes play should have won, and that's fine. We may never see an ending like that again. But I will defend the 20% people that voted for Neal. I don't have a problem with that.
All right. So along those lines, moment of the year. I think we pretty much all expected this to be to go exactly as it went. Football finishing 13-0 at the Peach Bowl. Rowing winning its 4th straight American Athletic Conference Championship. Women's tennis reaching the NCAAs. And women's soccer beating North Carolina in 2 overtimes. This one was the runaway out of all of them. Football finishing 13-0 at the Peach Bowl. Got 97% of the vote as the moment of the year. Almost unanimous. Women's soccer, I think beating North Carolina got, God bless them, got 1 vote. That accounted for the 3%.
Wow.
But yeah, that one, like you said, I mean, the Mike Hughes thing, that one was pretty obvious. This one was pretty obvious. I mean, when are you ever going to see? Now, I don't care. Listen, Lopez, I know you're not on the national championship bandwagon, certainly not as much as I am. But when you have a team that does something like that, I mean, UCF became one of this year's cultural touchstones in sports because of what happened there in Atlanta and everything that happened after it, and that's why this is the moment of the year for UCF.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't, regardless how you feel about after all the stuff, that doesn't take away from the winning the Peach Bowl and you beat Auburn and you go undefeated in the season. I don't think anybody's questioning. That's no question is the moment of the year. Maybe the moment of the history of the program and the moment of the university.
Okay, Brian, is that the moment of the program?
Probably, just because people will always judge you by your highest accolade, greatest acclaim, and for this program, they went undefeated and won what was formerly known as the BCS Bowl. And I know they already won one as well, and with the Fiesta Bowl, but that season they weren't undefeated. So yeah, it's probably the moment of the program, is the culmination of the greatest season. Beating an SEC team in a New Year's Day bowl, that's probably it.
Yeah. All right, performance of the year. This is sort of an individual award, although we did have the women's tennis team of Martinez and Kuznetsova. Performance of the year: single game performance by an individual or single event performance. We mentioned Martinez and Kuznetsova. Gabby Durant's hammer throw in track and field, Aaliyah White one-hitting UF for softball, and Shaquem Griffin in the Peach Bowl. Shaquem wins with 64% of the vote for his performance in the Peach Bowl. His best game of the year, definitely. Interestingly enough, Eric Lopez, Aaliyah White got 30% of the vote for one-hitting UF, but Shaquem far and away above that. I love it when you see a great player save his best, not only for last, but for the biggest moment and on the biggest stage. And that's what Shaquem Griffin did in that game. Because you go back and you look at the games that he had, quite a few of them were, certainly by his standards, fairly pedestrian. But his performance in that game against Auburn was sublime. And I'm glad that he got the award. And it was excellent to see him do that in UCF's biggest moment of the year. Don't you, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, it's the crowning achievement, and it's the guy that the program is revolved around last season. I mean, outside of Scott Frost, on the field, the program was about Shaquem Griffin, I believe. So for him to step up in the biggest game of the program's history, really, it's a big moment. I will say, though, I'm kind of glad that it wasn't like an 85, 90% runaway, because there are other deserving candidates here, and I'm glad people kind of saw that.
Yeah, Shaquem, by the way, in that game, 12 tackles, 6 solo, a sack and a half, 3.5 tackles for loss. He spent much of the day in the Auburn backfield harassing Jared Stidham, and it was his best performance of the year statistically. Lopez,
they don't win that game without him. Yeah. He was the best player in the field. They don't win that game. In fact, if he's not on that team on that day, I think Auburn wins by 2 touchdowns. I think he might be that big of an impact. I think that game got him drafted. I think it's one of the greatest performances any UCF football player has ever had in a game like that. And that's why I think he will be probably one of the top 3 names in the history, top 4, top 5. We'll go conservative. Go top 5 names in the history. When you think UCF football, I think he's in that list. I think he's on that list now with
definitely on the Mount Rushmore.
Yep. Yeah. But I am glad to Murph's point. Aaliyah getting 30%. That's a strong percentage vote, right? Like the strong percentile, as they like to say in the elections. So if it was a normal year, she probably would have won it. But
it wasn't a normal year.
And it was correct. But a great performance by her. So glad others got acknowledged for that.
Let's dispose of the drama right away and just let you know that Shaquem Griffin did also win Male Athlete of the Year. 88% of the vote. Mackenzie Milton got the other 12%. Eero Voss and Kyle Lovett got, and Matthias Puzzolo got, unfortunately for those guys, shut out, which kind of made me sad because they had great years in their own right.
That's an interesting vote, though. That's interesting. Griffin beats Milton 88-12. That's a pretty wide margin there.
I'm not surprised by how wide that margin is. I suspect there's a good possibility that Mackenzie Milton may very well win this award next year. When you think about it, and I think that's what people are thinking about right now.
Right, assuming he has the year that he just had. Sure. And look, I mean, I don't disagree with it, for the record. I don't disagree with it. Again, Mark Daniels, the voice of UCF football, he has a Heisman Trophy ballot, and he voted for Shaquem Griffin. And I thought I remember he wrote about that or tweeted about that, and it was all the intangibles that he brought to the team. Mm-hmm. And so I have no problems with that at all. I think it's the right decision. And certainly as we move forward to the summer and into the fall of 2018, one of the biggest questions that I will have is who the heck's going to replace Shaquem Griffin, not only what he provided on the field, but what he provided off the field.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest question that Randy Shannon has to address as the defensive coordinator is who fills that hole, not just by Shaquem, but also Shaquan Burkett, who, had a pretty good season in his own right. It's just such a tremendous hole that's left in the intangibles game there as well. Murph, Milton for next year, is he in the pole position for this award?
Yeah, and not only because he's playing football, because again, like as we've seen in this award, like if you play football, you're going to get more recognition just because of the sport you play, so you're going to probably get more votes, but also because he is now seen as the face of that program. Like if Shaquem's gone, Mackenzie Milton, who I think finished 8th in the Heisman Trophy voting last year, he's now the number one guy.
Yeah,
it's his team. So yeah, definitely
interesting. So
I could see a scenario here. Let me throw this scenario because I actually think this is plausible. What if Milton has a good year, another great year, but UCF does not go to the All Access Bowl? Let's say they go 10-2, win the American, but B.J. Taylor or Taco Fall actually play a healthy year and lead UCF to that elusive NCAA tournament. Could that be what it takes for somebody to win Male Athlete of the Year next year?
That could be. That could be.
Yeah,
I would wonder if I think if UCF makes the if UCF men's basketball makes the NCAA tournament, it's because of big years from both Taco Fall and B.J. Taylor, and they may end up splitting their vote.
Potentially, we don't know how it plays out. I mean, that's just trying to think of scenarios. I mean, I don't even want to speculate on baseball because we don't even know who's going to be on the roster. So that's talking. But it's harder, and Murph can relate. It's harder to single out a baseball player unless they had like a Chris Duffy type of year where it was, wow, this guy's an All-American type of player.
Who knows?
Yeah, Milton's a heavy favorite. Now, look, I mean, the thing is, I don't expect, like, there's a lot of talented position players on the football team, like the running backs and the receivers, but I feel like they're all going to cancel each other out. So I don't think any of them would jump Milton in a vote like that, right? Yeah. So I feel like, and I don't know, while there's going to be talent on the defensive side, I don't know if there's a guy that can match Milton next year if Milton has the year that he did this past year.
Female Athlete of the Year, and this one I thought was well-deserved. Our nominees were Kaylee Jones of women's golf, Morgan Ferrara of women's soccer, Kia Bright of volleyball, and Aaliyah White from softball. And Morgan Ferrara wins going away, 76% of the vote. Aaliyah White had 14%, Kaylee Jones had 7%, Kia Bright had 3%. But Morgan Ferrara, who was a true favorite among not just UCF women's soccer and the women's soccer community at UCF, but among her peers and among the people who work at UCF Athletics, everyone loves Morgan for all that she does off the field as well. She will be missed tremendously by UCF women's soccer, I think certainly next year, but well-deserved for her winning a Female Athlete of the Year.
We'll get an argument from me on that. I mean, she had was a big part of that offense for UCF when they were rolling. They were a top 10 team in the country, got a high seed to host, won the regular season title. And that'll be one of the questions that Coach Sahadak's going to have to answer once they get to the fall is how do they replace that production and that depth that they had.
Yeah.
But she was tremendous. No question. I agree with it. Deserves the vote. And to piggyback on the Milton point, I do think Aaliyah White is the favorite going into the next season When you consider some of the graduations that women's soccer had, the graduations that women's hoops had, I think certainly Aaliyah White will be the heavy. In fact, I actually think Aaliyah White's a heavier favorite on the women's side going into next year than Mackenzie Milton is on the male side, believe it or not.
You wouldn't get an argument on that from me, but I do think that that there's a possibility that we might see somebody kind of emerge from women's basketball. I don't think that we could. I don't think you can rule that out next year.
Could.
Given given the expectations that team is going to have, if they fulfill them, we might see somebody step in. We might see someone from volleyball have a tremendous season as well. Kia Bright was a huge part of what UCF has done in the last 5 years. But Todd Dagenais has a really talented crop coming back, especially these two freshmen that he had in Christina Fisher and Anne-Marie Watson. I mean, they might. Who knows what they're going to do in the next season? So I think this is more of a toss-up than you think.
Nerf?
What? Hey, sure. I mean, what else can I say here?
Well, I will. Let me counter this real quick. Well, before you go, here's my counter to that. And this is, I think it applies to Milton and White. They're both at positions where they have a lot of say in the result, and that's why they will be like Milton's the quarterback at UCF. That is probably the biggest position in all of male sports at UCF. And I would argue that Aaliyah White's playing the position at pitcher is the most important position in all UCF women's sports. UCF women's softball will go as far as Aaliyah White goes.
Yeah.
And she's going to be a big part of that. And I would say UCF football will go as far as Mackenzie Milton goes to some extent. So they both play positions where are basically favors will always be among the favorites for player of the year. Let's put it through that way.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Definitely a fair point. That takes us to team of the year, which is like this is the big one. This is basically best picture. So we couldn't get Bonnie and Clyde to help us out here, but we've got but this was again another runaway. We had football, women's tennis, rowing, and women's soccer. 96% of the vote. UCF football this year, the team of the year. Just no surprise. When you do what they did, 13-0, conference champs. Again, I don't care whether or not you think the national championship thing is a thing or not. The fact that they were even in the discussion and had the season that they did, I mean, God bless women's tennis, rowing, and women's soccer for the years that they had, but it's hard to argue that one.
Who got the 4%? Who got the 4%?
Rowing. Rowing got all 4%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing, right? Like, I mean, I think that's a great, that you got to take, if you're Becky Kramer in women's rowing, that's a real big compliment, right? That's
well deserved.
You got 4% of them. I mean, that's awesome.
Well deserved, as they should have, I always think that program flies way under the radar anyway.
I wonder too, right? Don't you think maybe there's a couple of people that know that football's going to win? So hey, you know what? Why not just show some love to somebody else? Right? Isn't that
well?
I feel like that. That's
well. I do think that they deserved at least some votes on their own merit, but and it's interesting. But getting back to football for the second is it's so all right. So Phil Steele's preview came out, and obviously we're not doing a preview right now, but.
Yeah, he previewed UFC. UFC. Mackenzie Milton.
Oh boy, gosh, Phil. Oh man, what are you going to do? But he was very high on UCF coming into. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Let's explain to the audience for that joke. The cover has Mackenzie Milton on it, but it says UFC, instead of UCF. It was obviously a typo.
Yeah. Hey, look, he's an incredibly talented athlete. The fact that he's switching sports is is remarkable.
He can't do any worse. Can't do any worse than CM Punk did at UFC 225. So,
But we've got So here's the thing that I think. Obviously Phil Steele is high on UCF. He doesn't think that they'll go 13-0 again this year, but should compete for the American at the very least. I'll throw this out to you guys. What percentage chance do you have UCF winning the American next year? And what percentage chance do you have them going undefeated next year? And Brian, I will start with you.
Winning the American Conference or their East Division?
Winning the American Conference.
Winning the conference, 60%, like
Okay.
more than 50-50. Yeah, certainly. Going undefeated is sort of like Blucharski's GPA. It's 0.0.
It mathematically works out to 0.0. Elo?
0.0.
Wait, so you got 0% chance of undefeated.
Okay.
Correct, yes.
Is that because of the schedule? Is that just you don't think the ball will bounce the way it did last year? What? Okay.
Like, unless you're Alabama, it's really, really, really sort of fools, like the fool there, and to say that you're going to go undefeated.
Well,
So
it also applies to Alabama because I don't recall the last time they had an undefeated national championship.
So there you go. I mean, like what do you want me to say? You want me to say like 4%? Like it doesn't matter at that point. Like let's just say what it is. It's I would say it's not going to happen.
09 is your answer when Alabama went undefeated, won the national title.
That's 9 years ago.
Well, it's hard. I mean, it's not easy. Wow. That's all right. I wasn't expecting that question on this episode. I was hoping maybe a month from now we'll have a better feel. But I will say this.
We'll revisit. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm not going to go 0% on the undefeated because unlike others, I actually don't think UCF schedule is that hard, especially in the league. Like the only game that I have concerns about from UCF standpoint in the eastern side is the game in Tampa against USF. And I actually think USF will be better. See, and the thing that's interesting, I feel like USF's in the boat where UCF was a year ago, where everybody, remember last year when we were doing this episode probably a year ago, everybody was picking USF to win and probably go undefeated. Yeah. And everybody was wondering about UCF and the quarterback position. Oh, they're a year away. And I feel like the roles have reversed. And it's funny because last year USF had a coaching change. Oh, we got Charlie Strong in his first year, and he's got a loaded roster led by a star quarterback, Quentin Flowers. They're not going to miss a beat. And I think it's the same, and that's now the UCF role. They got a new head coach. They're not going to miss a beat. They've got a star quarterback. And I think everybody just assumes that USF's going to take 10 steps backwards because of Flowers, and rightfully so. Flowers was fantastic. But I think they'll, in a weird way, I think USF will be fine, and I actually think they could trip up UCF to Murph's point in that game.
That game's in Tampa, for one
correct.
thing.
And I think UCF could lose at Memphis too. I think those are the two games in the conference that I'm concerned about. Every other game they should win pretty comfortably.
It's just I always get scared of the game. Bill Simmons has a term for it. It's called the no effing way game. And it's a reference to, like, when you would play Madden and you could have it set on like rookie mode, all right, in a season, and there's just one game where the computer's AI just decides you are not going to win. All right, you fumble 10 every time you carry the ball gets batted around and intercepted, and you end up losing a game somewhere along the line in your Madden season. I'm terrified of the no effing way game. If it comes on it'll come probably when we least expect it. It was almost for the 2013 that game up in Temple, right? Just seemed like nothing was quite going right, and they just scraped out that win. But you think about all the things that happened in that game that were basically decided by a coin flip that went UCF's way, and UCF had a couple moments like that last year in the USF game, in the Memphis game. Even in the Auburn game, some coin flip moments that
SMU. I think SMU is
another good one. Yeah,
category. SMU is the one that would qualify. And if you want to say Navy for that matter, I think Navy.
The Navy one was another one.
This upcoming year, if you want to pick a game like that would be the one I would pick, is that Navy game at home. I still think the strength is on the western side in the conference. So I will say that UCF's probably, I would pick it about 65% win the league. And I will say about 20% chance they go undefeated.
Okay. 1 in 5 chance that they go undefeated.
I've been trying to look up, like, when's the last time a team went back-to-back undefeated? And I've been trying to figure this out. I could look it up, and if I had like a few more minutes, I could find it. But like, it's been a long, long time. Just the odds of it happening are
very long, very long. And we don't. And the wild card in all this, we don't know how good of any good North Carolina is going to be. North Carolina was a disaster last year, But Larry Fedora can coach, so you got to think Carolina can't be any worse than they were last year. Is Pittsburgh going to be any good this year? We don't know the wild card. Obviously, the game we haven't talked about is FAU, which that in itself, you want to talk about game of the year. That could be the game of the year right there. Because FAU will be ready for that game with Lane Kiffin. And I know people don't like Lane Kiffin and they may not like the personality or whatever, but the guy can coach and he can coach offense. And that game could be 49-42 where me and Brian Murphy are like in the parking lot, like at 2 a.m. getting out of there after a 5-hour game.
I'm looking up
by the way,
yeah.
The last program to go back-to-back undefeated is the 94-95 Nebraska Cornhuskers.
Well, there you go.
Tommy Osborne. It all goes
Scott
full
Frost.
Oh.
No, I'm sorry. No, that wasn't Scott Frost. I beg your pardon.
That was Tommy Frazier.
Tommy Frazier. Yeah, that's right. Although Scott Frost was, I believe, was on the roster for the second one, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
95 maybe, but they were also undefeated in 97. So Jesus.
Yeah, that was Frost.
Marone. I think Brooks Bollinger was a big quarterback for them.
That was the one in 95 because Frazier had that like an aneurysm or something, like a blood clot in his arm or something, some strange thing here. But that was the last team that went back to back undefeated seasons. So 94-95 Nebraska. So good find, Brian, on that one. So. All right. Well, that does it for the Bannies. So we wanted to thank everyone who voted. Thanks to you guys, again, for hanging with me. And thanks for a great year, and I really do mean that, Eric and Brian. And thanks to Derek Warden, our staff photographer who was out there, at all the football games, multiple other events, like slaving away with his incredible equipment, giving us some unbelievable photos. I mean, if you get the chance to check him out, please do, because he's just an amazing photographer, and we're very lucky to have him. I'm lucky to have the two of you guys on this podcast and on the staff writing all the stuff that you guys write. And I want to thank you again for an excellent 2017, 2018 year. It's just been a blast, and we witnessed history. And we had a front row seat for it, and it wouldn't have been as fun if we'd done things separately. As having you guys on board has just been a blast, and I thank you both, Brian and Eric, for everything that you've done for me and for Black and Gold Banneret this year.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
I appreciate you guys.
It's been a blast, boys.
It has been a blast. Now, all right, let me preface this. Now, this is the end of the 2017-2018 year for us, but over the summer we'll have occasional. We'll be able to drop in some emergency podcasts. I'm sure Eric Lopez will be having one when the new softball coach gets hired. We will be having, and I'm sure if there's any other news that comes down that Brian catches wind of or anything, and we'll also do our summer sessions with alumni that we're also working on as well. We're not going to reveal who any of them are, but you're going to remember their names. And we've got some really good stuff coming up for you as well. In the meantime, I will close as we always do. What are your guys' plans for the summer? Brian, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm looking to get home, Jeffrey.
I knew you were going to say that.
I'm looking to some point survive the night out here in the middle of nowhere, Florida, and see my bed again. So that's my plan. And then hopefully in the next couple of days, I might go visit men's basketball, which actually might happen.
Dante Culpepper visited men's basketball today, by the way. There's a photo. Well, Coach Dawkins was circulating a photo on Twitter of that.
Well, where Dante Culpepper is, I follow closely behind.
Eric, what about you?
Well, let's see. I'll be doing still softball podcast on In the Circle on Fast Pitch News. A lot of coaching moves, as you mentioned, still to be made. So I'll be following that. I shall be doing some episodes from Vieira, Florida this week. And hoping to catch up with actually former Knights, Shelby Turnier, who's playing for the Bandits. So,
Now, speaking of off-season moves, Murph, are you going to be doing more work for the Sentinel at all? Or anything you can divulge on that?
Wow. Jeffrey,
no. Listen, I
really
want
going there.
I want to. Listen, you did such a great job for them covering the college baseball, And I think that the more places that people can read stuff that you write, the better. So, I really do want to compliment you on the work that you did there, and it was great because UCF, and I think the fans trust you. So you have two guys in our corner. You have two guys in your corner on that one.
Well, thank you. And I only make fun of it because I'm awful at selling myself, so I don't like to talk about these sort of things. But
well, you should leave that to me. I charge 10%.
Yeah, so there you go. And then I'll just say like, fine, whatever. But yeah. Let's just say yes.
Okay.
Let's just say yes.
Good. Well, I'm hoping that we see more of you, wherever it is we can get, and obviously Eric with all the work that you do as well. Spokes_Murphy for Brian on Twitter. For Eric, it's Eric Lopez Elo. For me, it's Jeff_Sharon. For Derek, it's _DS Warden on Twitter. Make sure you check out his work this year, from this past year as well. It's been a real blast. We're hoping to do some more things over the summer that I think you'll find interesting. Getting ready for the previews. Obviously, we're talking a little football off season. And by the way, boys, 30 days today, 30 days until American Athletic Conference Football Media Day.
Oh boy,
here we go. Right back at it again.
Someone gonna pay for my plane flight? Someone gonna pay for my plane ticket?
But someone might. It's not going to be me. I have a budget of zero.
For all we know, Murph, you might be closer to Rhode Island right now than you're in Orlando.
Yeah,
it might be.
You might already be there.
I literally might be. I can't stress this enough. I'm not where people are at this point. I don't even know if humans are around.
Oh boy. Would it make you feel better that at the time of this recording there's still baseball going on, or no?
Oh, it does. Baseball always comforts me like a warm blanket. I'm like Linus in Peanuts.
Just get there wherever you're going. Just get there safely. And thanks again. Remember, a reminder to you, you can follow us throughout the offseason at UCF_Banneret on Twitter, at Facebook.com/BlackandGoldBanneret on Facebook. And, of course, always at blackandgoldbanneret.com. Subscribe to us via your email. You can actually get email updates from us by just signing up with your email address at blackandgoldbanneret.com. So for all of us at Black and Gold Banneret, for Eric, for Derek, for Brian, for me, for everybody who's made it possible, including our sponsor for this podcast, the Unger Real Estate Group, Sam Unger and his folks have done a fine job as well. They came on as our first sponsor this year, and we're so thankful to Sam for his incredible generosity. I mean, I remember when I met him for this the first time, we're like, all right, we're kind of going into uncharted territory, you and me. Like, you ever sponsored anything? He was like, nah. You ever had a sponsor? I was like, nah. I was like, great, we're made for each other. So, thanks to Sam for his support. He's just been so good to us. It's been great, guys. You've been great to me. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Jeff.
See you soon, boys.
And that will do it for the Black and Gold Banneret podcast for 2017-2018. Keep posted on your feeds for our summer sessions. Until then, enjoy your summer. Go Knights and charge on. Thanks for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret podcast.